Open your phone right now. You have an app for your bank, right? You have an app for your health. I mean, I'm also wearing an Apple Watch. I have it too. And as of this morning, you probably have an app that lets you bet on whether a Category 5 hurricane hits Miami before June, right? Right. So today, we aren't talking about the Super Bowl anymore. We aren't talking about the Olympics anymore. We're talking about the meta game, so to speak. Because that meta game has swallowed the Super Bowl, it has swallowed the Olympics, it has swallowed politics. We're talking about, let me check, the $44 billion industry as of 2025 that decide the future isn't something that you build, it's something that you bet on. You basically short the future if you want to make lots of money. So we're talking about prediction markets and why right now in 2026 we kind of seem to stop trying to fix the world and just started betting on how it ends. It's the end of the world and we know it. Saudi Cup and welcome to another sad episode of the Funkepod Mindful Media and Communication. Yeah, I still have the "It's the End of the World" song now by REM in my head. If you're too young to know it, check it out, because we feel fine. But let's rewind for a second. How did we end up here? How did we get to a point where we don't care about anything unless we're betting on it? Yeah, how do we get to a point where like a guy sitting next to you on the subway is betting on the inflation rate of Turkey, for example? And I think it started with a trend. I think it started that we all got trained over years, and I think we all got trained over years by sports betting. Yeah, remember in 2024, 2 years ago, you couldn't watch any football game, any NBA game, whatever, without seeing Jamie Foxx or Kevin Hart telling you to download an app, and they're gonna be like, risk-free bet, same game parlay, and all those things, right? And I mean, as you can see from my shirt, I'm from Germany. Every other football team is the real football team is sponsored by a betting company, or like streaming services are sponsored by betting companies. Every other podcast that you and I listen to are sponsored by sports betting or other betting, right? And they told you it was about like loving the game, right? I actually noted it down as a quote because it was a quote of one of those sports betting advertisers, do it for loving the game. Complete lie, right? What it was about, it was about conditioning, about getting used to betting on stuff. Yeah, it was about rewiring how you're getting dopamine, because they taught like an entire generation of young men, and statistics show it is mostly men. So not trying to be sexist. They taught that whole generation that watching an event without having any stakes on it is boring. I mean, I just listened to an MMA podcast while I was in the gym this morning, and there's a segment on the podcast where they always talk about which bets they're hedging. I'm like, what the hell? So if you aren't sweating the outcome, you aren't alive. You're not invested, right? Well, congratulations. The conditioning worked. You're one of them, because you're addicted to the sweating it. And once you need the sweat, football is enough. MMA isn't enough. You need higher stakes. You want that sweat not just every weekend or every game day. You want it anytime, any place, anywhere. And that's when the devil himself materialized in the form of prediction markets. Devil was like, hey, you want to sweat? I'll make you sweat. So let's jump into the assassination market. Because in 2025, so yeah, just last year, the combined volume of, and I have it here, of Polymarket and Kalshi, which are the two biggest prediction markets, hit 44 billion US dollars. That's larger than the GDP of, I don't know, half the countries that you're betting on. But it's not just numbers, right? It's actual lives. So we're betting on livelihoods. Look at the most famous example. Look at the Venezuela rate from, was it just last month? It feels like a year ago. Um, 3 days, and I have the numbers here. 3 days before the raid, a trader on Polymarket put $30,000 on the contract. Will Maduro be out by January 31st? The odds were 11%. So nobody thought it was happening. The trader bought it up. 3 days later, raid happens, contract pays out. The trader made 400,000 in an afternoon. And again, that's the numbers I found online. I'm gonna throw an allegedly in there, but that's the numbers that are out online. And there are more takedown videos or like videos that explain how Polymarket, Kalshi, and so on work. So check those out for those. But that's not just a prediction market bet. That's insider trading, right? And I mean, in this case, I said as a joke in the beginning, but it's kind of like an assassination market, right? Who's gonna get it next? So think about the psychology behind it, and that's what we're talking about here in media and communication, right? So think about the psychology behind it. If you bet $1,000 on a war starting, right? You're now psychologically incentivized to want the war. I can emphasize enough how weird of a communication shift that is. Before, you're observing politics, and now you're actively wanting something to happen because it's good for your pocket. You're sitting on your couch, you're watching CNN, Fox, whatever, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, right? And you're cheering for the bombs to drop because your yes shares are trading at like 80 cents a dollar or whatever. Isn't that crazy? And there's a theory out there in media theories, we call it the entrepreneur of self. So you're not just a citizen anymore, you're like the hedge fund manager, and your portfolio is filled with like human misery because you're betting on it. How can we be okay with this? It's not an ethics podcast, it's not a humanitarian podcast, but even from a communications point of view, like how can we be okay with that? And I mean, since communication media is very much related to like technology, of course, let's quickly look at this. Like the tech bros, they love it. Of course they do. The tech bros, okay. The tech bros, they love it, right? Of course they do. Why wouldn't they? I was reading a thread by Alpha Raccoon, the guy who apparently made millions predicting Google search rankings. Like, yeah, that's how petty it gets. It's a real thing, apparently. It can predict Google search rankings. His argument, and I quote, "The market is the only truth. The media lies, the polls lie, but money doesn't lie." On bullshit. Since when does money tell the truth? Money never tells the truth. Money never told the truth, and money will never tell the truth. Money tells you where the liquidity is. Liquidity does not equal truth. Welcome to communication. I don't want to call it 101, but basics of communication. Right now, as I speak, there is more money being bet on the Oscars Best Picture than there's on the UN peacekeeper deployment. So are we saying that the Oscars Best Picture is more important, for example? No, we're not. So, but what it means is they're not more important, clearly. I hope we agree on that, but they are more fun. They're more fun to gamble on. And hence, if it's more fun to gamble on, it becomes more important for us in the moment, and we don't care about the actual stuff that's happening. So we are confusing accuracy with popularity. If it's popular, It's important. And you know what? The government, all the governments, I'm not just singling out one, the governments didn't know it. There was a representative named Richie Torres who was just introduced, and I quote the Public Integrity in Financial Prediction Markets Act of 2026. So this act bans Congress from betting on prediction markets. Well, thank God there's a law now that prevents Congress people from insider trade. It would be terrible if anyone who serves in Congress would do any trading with insider knowledge. It would never happen, clearly. Because if there's no one thing you know about Congress, right? They never find a way around such rules. Lord, I'm sorry if I lost track for a second, but the more you think about it, the more you wonder. We do understand, right? If you talk about it, like we all understand that this is bad, that those are the devil, that this is the devil's work, so to speak. Yet nothing happens, and yet we just keep moving forward. I bet there are several hundred bets on the Epstein files, probably, right? We just keep moving forward, and there are people going to make money on it because they have information. Why are we okay with that? Why are we okay with all of that? Is it because A, it is distraction? We like the sweat and we want to have some, investment. Otherwise, it doesn't feel real to us. Like if it's just news, I don't care. So I'm going to bet on it. So I'm going to care more, but then I care on a certain outcome. I don't care about like unbiased outcomes. I care about like what's better for my pocket, right? For my wallet. So because we have given up on society and we have given up on the idea of like finding ways to live together, work together, make everything work out together, and rather just focus on our own pockets. So all of the above, and are we just being controlled by the big players that are turning a blind eye to those prediction markets because they're clearly mostly running on insider trades? Or is it all of the above? From a media and communications point of view, I find it incredibly interesting, and that's just trying to phrase it positively because it's also very disturbing to watch. And last thing here, very interesting to see how big corporations, UFC, for example, I think they're partnering with Polymarket, I believe. I don't know about the other big leagues like NBA and so on. They might, I'm not sure who they partner with, if they partner, but definitely like UFC with Polymarket, and that's CBS now, right? Paramount CBS has a deal with the UFC. So basically Paramount CBS legitimizing Polymarket. So if a big company, big TV broadcaster, such as Paramount CBS, works with Polymarket, it makes it sound like it must be a legitimate business model. So I can probably trust it because otherwise Paramount, my TV provider, wouldn't work with them if they would be sketchy, right? And that leads me back to the beginning. And there's lots of money involved. 44 billion US dollars as of last year. They're throwing all the money at CBS, of course, for partnerships and so on. And we somehow, and they do it too, and that's why we do it, they try to equal liquidity. They try to equal liquidity with legitimacy. And that obviously not the case, will never be the case, but that's exactly what they try to make you and I and all of us believe. So where does this leave us, right? We are living in a huge casino. And the house rules are quite simple in that casino. Everything is content and everything has odds. So sometimes I try to end the podcast with a challenge, right? So challenge this week could be try something radical. Like, watch the Winter Olympics curling and don't bet on it. Read the news about Greenland. Don't check the odds. You gotta reclaim your right to be surprised, because you remember how awesome it was to be surprised and to not have like a bet on everything. Gotta reclaim the right to just be an observer and not a shareholder. Maybe without always sweating about everything, you're actually gonna sleep a bit better. Gonna be like, calm, zen, find enlightenment, and not sweat over every single push notification you're getting. Because if you treat the end of the world like a slot machine, eventually you're going to hit the jackpot. And if you're going to hit the jackpot after betting on the end of the world, you're not going to like the price. You know that the house always wins, but you don't have to walk through the door. Keep your guard up when it comes to all those prediction markets. Don't let them hit you. Don't let them lure you in. If they come close, you elbow them in the face. And I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay safe, take care, study cup.